Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever really stopped to think about what an emotion actually is? I mean, it's something we experience constantly, right? But understanding it? Well, that's surprisingly complex. Today, we're diving deep into the nature and the components of emotion. We've got a fascinating stack of sources here, and our mission really is to give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed on this fundamental human experience. Maybe even throw in a few surprising facts along the way. Now, the first thing our sources make clear is, well, the core challenge. There isn't actually one single scientific consensus on emotions definition, which is kind of wild when you think about it. Centuries of theorizing across psychology, philosophy, neuroscience. But despite that, there are some widely accepted general features that help us get a handle on it.
Absolutely. And what's really key is that emotions aren't just simple feelings. They're consistently described as, complex psychological states. Think of them as responses to significant, personally relevant events or situations in your life. And the core idea, the one that keeps coming up, is their multi-componential nature.
Multi-componential, so like lots of parts working together.
Exactly. There are generally 5 interrelated components people talk about. First, there's this subjective experience. That's the feeling itself, what it's like for you personally to be angry or happy or scared. It's your private interpretation. Then number 2 is cognitive appraisal. This is a really quick, often unconscious evaluation your brain makes about what an event means for you. And that appraisal is actually what determines the specific emotion you feel. Is this situation threatening? Is it beneficial?
Okay, so the feeling bit, and then how my brain sort of sizes it up instantly. What else?
Right. Third is the physiological or bodily symptoms. The physical stuff changes in heart rate. Maybe you start sweating, blood pressure shifts, that physical reaction. Fourth is motor expression. These are the observable signs, like facial expressions. You mentioned Paul Ekman earlier. His work on universal expressions is fascinating here. But also things like posture, how you hold yourself, or changes in your voice.
Like how you can sometimes hear if someone's upset on the phone.
Precisely. And finally, number 5, action tendencies. This is the motivational part. It's how the emotion prepares you and sort of pushes you towards certain responses, like anger might prime you for aggression, or fear makes you want to escape.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just one single thing happening. It's like this whole cascade, the feeling, the quick thought, the body reacting, how you look, and what you feel like doing, all intertwined.
That's a great way to put it, a cascade, or maybe like orchestrated response. And you touched on something important earlier. Emotions also have intentionality. They're usually about something specific. Fear is fear of the dog, anger is anger at the driver, and of course they vary in intensity and how long they last.
Okay, this is making more sense. But here's where I, and probably lots of listeners, get a bit fuzzy. People use emotions, feelings, moods almost interchangeably. Are they really different? This is where it gets really interesting, I think.
It does. And it's a common point of confusion. But yeah, there are important distinctions according to most theories. Feelings, as we sort of touched on, are generally seen as just one component of emotion, specifically that subjective conscious awareness part, what it feels like. But importantly, not all feelings are emotions. You can have a feeling of familiarity or a feeling of knowing something, which aren't quite emotions in this framework.
Okay. So feeling is part of emotion, but not the whole story. And not all feelings count as emotions. What about moods then? I woke up in a grumpy mood today.
Right. Well, moods are typically described as less intense than emotions. They're also usually longer lasting. They can hang around for hours or even days. And critically, moods often lack a specific identifiable trigger. They're more like a background affective tone, not necessarily about something specific like an emotion often is.
Like an emotional weather forecast for the day, maybe?
That's a decent analogy, yeah. And then there's the term affect. This is the really broad umbrella term. Affect covers emotions, moods, even just general positive or negative dispositions. It's the most general category.
Got it. Okay, that helps clear things up. Feelings are the subjective part, moods are longer and less specific, and affect is the big umbrella. So if emotions are these complex, multi-part reactions, how do different scientists try to define and classify them? Are there different schools of thought?
Oh, definitely. There are a few main ways researchers approach this. One is through discrete emotion theories. These theories propose that there's a limited set of innate, universal, basic emotions. Think anger, fear, happiness, sadness, disgust, surprise. These are often seen as having distinct physiological patterns and, importantly, those universal facial expressions Ekman studied.
So like fundamental building blocks of our emotional life.
Kind of, yeah. But then you have dimensional models. These theories suggest it's maybe less about distinct categories and more about where emotions fall in continuous dimensions. The most common dimensions are valence, how pleasant or unpleasant it feels, and arousal, how intense or activating the emotion is. So anger would be unpleasant and high arousal.
Okay, so less like boxes, more like points on a map.
Exactly. And then there's a third major view, Constructivist theories. These are quite different. They argue that emotions aren't prepackaged things, but are actually constructed in the moment. They're built from more basic ingredients like your core physiological state, your core affect, combined with your knowledge, your past experiences, the language you use, and the immediate context. So these theories really emphasize context and learning, and they question whether there are truly distinct brain signatures for each basic emotion.
That's fascinating, the idea that we build our emotions in the moment. It makes me wonder then, how universal is emotion really, if context and culture play such a big role in constructing them?
That's a huge question, and the sources definitely point towards cultural and historical variability. While some basic aspects, like maybe some physiological responses or core affect, might be universal, how emotions are expressed, understood, valued, and even experienced can differ significantly across cultures and history. And here's that surprising fact I mentioned. The actual word emotion in English is relatively new. It only really came into common usage in the early 1800s. Before that, people talked more about passions or sentiments or affections.
Wow, only since the 1800s. That really makes you think about how language itself might shape how we even conceive of these experiences, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Our conceptual tools influence what we perceive.
Okay, so wrapping this up then. In essence, based on our sources, an emotion seems to be this really complex reaction pattern. It involves those intertwined subjective feelings, the quick cognitive evaluations, the physiological changes in your body, and those behavioral responses or action tendencies. And it all seems geared towards helping us adapt and respond to things that matter to us in our environment.
That's a pretty solid summary of the consensus view, yeah. It's this adaptive multi-component response. But it leaves us with a really interesting, almost provocative thought, especially considering the constructivist and cultural points.
Which is?
Well, the very concept of emotion is, to some extent, a cultural and historical construction. Does that mean people in different cultures or different historical periods genuinely feel things differently? Or do they just have different ways of describing, interpreting, and perhaps managing fundamentally similar underlying experiences?
Are the feelings themselves different, or just the labels and understanding we put on them? That is something to definitely ponder. A great place to leave it for now, encouraging you all to continue your own deep dive into this really fascinating world of emotion.
Thank you for watching. Before you go, a like and share would help others find it. Please subscribe for more journeys together.